Welcome to Scrunchy Time. I'm Nicole Hegstead, your fertility advocate. After 6 years of infertility and 3 miscarriages, I decided that I needed to become the advocate for my own body. If you're exhausted from struggling to get pregnant and want to know more about how I can help, check out my website at www.nicolehegstead.com.
And I'm Bee Wild, speaking up for children in a world where mental and physical health of the next generation is being disregarded. I'm here to dish out the tough love truths that we need to wake up to as parents and Christians. If you're fed up with mixed opinions and ready to advocate for your own child, check out my website at www.thebewildlife.com.
Put your hair up and pay attention while we discuss today's hottest topics concerning female hormones and healthy kiddos.
We aren't silky.
We aren't crunchy. We're scrunchy.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you want to hear more, hit that subscribe button.
And a special thank you to those who make this financially possible. To support this podcast, please follow the link in our description.
Hello and welcome back to Scrunchy Time. I guess we didn't talk about who was going to introduce, so I just jumped in. Sorry.
I know, it was like, hey, it was my turn, but fine.
It's your turn. I think I've introduced
Just take this one, Nicole. It's all good.
I'm just going to lead the way. All right. Well, so today we're going to be talking about basically why we are scrunchy and what that all entails, and the difference between alternative medicine and traditional medicine, and
how it applies in what we preach.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I think the biggest thing is traditional medicine is what
is a term that really depends on who you talk to.
Exactly.
I knew where you were going with that, and I'm like, oh no, we need to make sure. And alternative medicine is a term that really depends on who you talk to.
Okay, so oh my gosh, this is horrible. Traditionally, the definition of traditional medicine, it would be our current Western medical system. So if you talk to any doctor, they're going to call it traditional medicine is what they practice. So break a bone, you get a splint, that's traditional medicine. You have cancer, you get surgery and chemotherapy and radiation and all of that, that's traditional medicine. You have a cold, you go in, you get antibiotics, that's traditional medicine, right? Alternative is anything outside of that. So you get a cold and you take garlic, that's alternative medicine. Now, what's hysterical about that, and this is actually pointed out by someone we were watching, a year ago now, is that he was Chinese and he was talking about Chinese medicine. And he was saying that he laughs because Chinese medicine is over 4,000 years old. And he comes to America and the doctors who have been using a system that's been in place for maybe 100 years. I mean, let's face it, like not even that long. You know, the pregnancy test has been around
10 years.
Yeah. Like it's not long. Like the pregnancy test is, sorry, what was that?
Still in testing?
Yes, exactly.
Don't even know what the hell we're doing?
Well, I mean, if it's something that has been around for let's say it has been around for 100 years, right? How many generations is that? 3? Like you inherit what your grandparents had in their body when they were pregnant with your mom. So how would we even know how this is affecting future generations? You can't.
Even if you say 100 years, it's talking so minuscule.
It really is. Yes.
So low.
Absolutely. So he was laughing because the term traditional is used for something that's been around 70 to 100 years versus something that's been around for thousands and thousands of years and has worked in multiple countries. And we found that to be funny and ironic and hysterical and so Western.
Waves and actually defining them as they are. So if you hear us speaking, alternative medicine is really modern medicine in our verbiage. Absolutely. Because it is true. Like we have nothing to back up what we're doing.
Right.
Even our tests are inconclusive. Like that is very interesting. We just talked about this in our last podcast about medications and stuff. Like our tests are not even conclusive, or they prove that things are wrong, but we continue to use them anyway.
Right.
That's an alternative to proven things that are working.
Absolutely.
So we know garlic works. Chinese medicine proves that. all these, we were just trying to remember all these. There's 5 different types of ancient medicine is probably what they'd be called, that have been proven for thousands of years, and they complement each other. Like that's the other thing is like our Western medicine is so far out there compared to anything we've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
It's so far out there.
So true. So true.
Like,
I was talking to a friend of mine in England, and she does Tai Chi, and she started talking about it, and I was sharing something with her. I was having a really emotional day, and so we were talking about emotions, and somehow emotion clearing came up, and she started talking about Tai Chi, and we like concluded, because I really know nothing about Tai Chi, and she knew nothing about emotion clearing, and by the end of the conversation, we were like, this is the same exact thing. It's just 2 different titles for it, you know? And just, it was amazing to find like a completely different culture that does the same exact thing. And so like it's to me, that proves that it works when you have multiple cultures that are doing the same thing versus, like you said, we really have nothing in the history of mankind that our modern medicine is based on in any way, shape, or form. And I mean, you just named 5 things. You have Chinese medicine, which is obviously in China. I don't know if I'm going to say this word right because I've only ever seen it spelled. And so it's how I pronounce it in my own words. But Ayurveda is from India. And those 2 are so interchangeable. They are very, very similar. Yeah. And then of course you've got other ancient cultures that have, you know, the same thing. And we have all this history with herbs and food and water being used to heal people. And obviously, like, we don't need to be bleeding people. Like, that's not what we're talking about, right? But if you look at the concept of bleeding people, when did that come about? Like, that was a Western medicine thing, actually. Like, they never did that in China. They never did that in India, right? They did that in England and America. And so I really think a lot of our medical practices in 100 years, we're going to be looking back on it the way we look at bleeding people, you know? Like, you mean they shot people full of radiation because they had a fungi in their body called cancer? That was stupid. Why didn't they take this herb that, you know, it's really a vitamin deficiency that they need to be taking? You know, I really see it as being like a scurvy thing that we're going to look back on and say, that was stupid.
Yep.
But maybe they'll have their own modern medicine at that point that's also just as equally bad, and we won't.
But it in its own way, and that's the thing, is because they were just going off of, let's try this, maybe it might work. I don't know. So, Of course it is. If we continue down this path, it will be just as outlandishly crazy as versus bleeding people versus
scurvy.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where we're headed until we wake up and realize that we have all the answers.
And it's a mindset that we're smarter than people of the past. That's where this is coming from, because we have to have a medication, right? Our last podcast is on medications. We have to have a medication that's been tested and proven and all of the things that we have to do, when for generations, thousands of generations, a tea worked to fix our problem, you know? And it's insane.
Even down to lifestyle. Like, the reason we need a lot of these medications is because of the lifestyles we lead.
Absolutely.
If we would get outside, we wouldn't have allergy and asthma problems.
Absolutely.
If we would, XYZ. We could we don't really want to go into the lifestyle aspect here.
Right.
But like that is a lot of the fault of our modern world too, is because we've wanted to make things fast and convenient.
Right.
And it doesn't work. And especially as Christians, you hear me say this all the time, we have to stop it. We have to. That is not the way God designed us to live. Therefore, we can't keep doing it. It is not God glorifying to live in this fast-paced, man-made, glorified life. And it's... Go ahead.
You hear people say, like, man has lived for thousands of years this one way, and we have not evolved, quote unquote, to be like, even more so for the Christian, because I believe God created us to live a certain way. Like, this isn't about we need to evolve to the next stage of fast-paced living. This is about God created us to live in a much slower society, in a much slower lifestyle. And we are like, not just that we aren't evolved to be here, we are literally not created to be doing what we're doing. Like, and that is a huge difference, and it's extremely important to recognize.
Yep. Well, and it all comes down to being able to support each other, being able to support our families, to provide for our children. I'm sorry, if you have to give your children up to go to work and have them be raised by someone else, I'm guilty of this right now. So I'm preaching to the choir. But that is not the way we're supposed to live. And I'm working on trying to figure out how to fix that. But that is not, God did not give us children to be raised by somebody else for 8 hours a day.
Absolutely.
We have to fix this.
Absolutely.
It has to change.
Absolutely.
So now we've segued into lifestyle, and this is supposed to be about Scrunchy. So the other thing we should bring up is Scrunchy, the term Scrunchy. So Crunchy is someone who is a granola eating hippie, right? And Scrunchy is someone who is in between. So they're like, they do modern medicines, Western medicines, and then they also incorporate the granola, herb, tea drinking, hippie stuff. So it's a combination.
And you didn't define Silky. Silky is someone who follows modern medicine. So would go to the doctor if they have a fever, would like basically go to the doctor for everything. Like that's
literally, I think I'm catching a cold, so let's go to the doctor.
Yeah. So, and then a Scrunchy would be in between, incorporating from both those worlds.
Yes. Yeah. So that's where we came up with our podcast, because especially 2 years ago, we were very much in the middle. We were, the Fritz was still going through tons of medical stuff and XYZ. So we were very much like, we need both of these lifestyles. Now we're a little bit more crunchy, and there's some times where we're like, is there anything we agree with in Western medicine? But the fact is there is. And especially from my lifestyle, I want to praise and thank doctors up and down, because they have saved Fritz.
Absolutely.
But the reasons how they saved him, modern surgery is one of them. Like, oh my gosh, the heart surgery they can do on newborn babies. I mean, you can't see for those of you who are listening, but a newborn baby's heart, I mean, what would that be? Just probably $50 size.
Yeah.
Yeah. On a heart. And they go in there and they replace valves and chambers, and oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, even into extent of the medication, like to have the correct pain dosage to this and that. And they don't always. Don't think it's a fairy tale going in to watch your son have open heart surgery, because you will see them go through hell and back because they don't have it right. But it's better than not, right?
Well, so I mean, they're having heart surgery. Like, there's no perfect way to have heart surgery.
The problem is an infant, and so we can't judge their pain levels. That's right. Because they're on paralytics and all of this, and so you don't know if they're in pain or not. Whereas an adult wouldn't be on a paralytic, and so they would be able to say, I'm in pain. So there are huge issues.
It hurts my heart.
But there's nothing you can do about it. He's alive. It's like that is something you just had to go through, and I believe in that, and would do it all over again if it meant I could have my son for another 5 years the way Absolutely. I have. There are some things there where I believe our modern world has gotten us to the point where we need these open heart surgeries, and we shouldn't.
Right.
Like, we were told even back then, Fritz will be 5 this year, that this is a very rare case. Since then, I have randomly, so it's not like I got into a group of all these heart mamas. No, through friends and even close friends, people I grew up with, all of a sudden their kids have the exact same issue.
Yes.
That, I believe, is where our genetic defects are catching up to us again, and these things are becoming more common. So there's part of that where, like, yes, modern surgery is amazing, but I don't believe we should have needed it in the first place. There are some cases like that.
Right. Cystic fibrosis, that's another one. I actually have a friend who has 2 sons who has cystic fibrosis, CF. And when we met them, it was like this whole new thing, like, wow, like, I think he's like 8 or 9 now. And it was like this, like she was like, it's super rare, a lot like Fritz, like this random thing. I mean, it's so common now that there's a movie out about it where these kids have CF, you know, like it's such a common, like it's not common, like you don't run into it like cold or anything, but like
if you heard it, you wouldn't think twice about it.
Exactly. And it shouldn't be that common. It's not supposed to be. And so, yeah,
It's no different than babies being born with diabetes, you know, like even down to the smallest inconvenient, quote unquote, disease is more and more common, and it never should happen.
Absolutely. So you look at these things, the concepts of our lifestyle, you look at the concepts of our medications that we talked about last week, you look at the toxic chemicals that we're being exposed to, you look at our food and how it's been genetically modified in the last 100 years, and something is not working. Air quality, yes, yeah, and water quality, like these things are not working. It's broken. Like, and again, right. And people will say, well, why didn't it bother our grandparents? Because they had the good DNA and the good nutrition from 3 generations back and further, probably. It takes 3 generations for things to start compiling.
But it is affecting our grandparents. Like, that's the other thing. I mean, it kind of depends on where you are in the genetic lineup. My family is kind of weird because it just is. But we have huge gaps in our family. Look at how many medications your grandparents are on. Mm-hmm. When your grandparents were 90 years old and weren't on anything, right. They lived just as long and not on anything.
Right.
So, and you know, then the case is to be argued too, the quality of life. Like, frankly, I've known some 80, 90-year-old people who are mind-blowing in their capabilities, and now today you can't find people like that.
Yep.
In the 90s. It has gone downhill fast.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. I agree. So it's catching up with us, and we're clearly not doing the right things to fix it. And so I think the biggest thing with the traditional stuff is we do believe in antibiotics in the right circumstance. When you have a life-threatening bacterial infection that antibiotics are going to help with, then take it by all means. That does not apply to a virus in any way, shape, or form. When you need open heart surgery, when you need a surgery where there's a tumor and something needs to be removed, you know, like as much as you need to be treating cancerous things with herbs and all of that, there comes a point where you got to remove the tumor. Like it needs to be removed. If I end up in a car accident and my artery is severed, I want somebody to stitch that back together or clamp it shut or whatever you're going to do to it. I don't want to know. Like, don't tell me, because garlic is not going to help. I'm not going to like be like, oh no, I'll go home and eat some garlic for that. Right. Like, you do whatever you got to do. I'm not even going to research what you would do for that, because I trust you with my artery that's been severed. Right. That's where that silky comes in. But there's a lot of other things that basically, if it's not life-threatening, and even if it is life-threatening, but it's a slow life-threatening, right? Like it's not an emergency where you got to go to ER. Like you need to be looking at alternative ways to be curing these things and changing your lifestyle to fix these things. My husband actually had I'm going to throw him under the bus. I love this man. I'm going to start by saying I love my husband to death. But he has not been eating very well, and he has not been treating his body very well. And I am a big believer in he's a big boy and he's an adult, and I'm not going to be his mother and tell him, you got to eat your veggies now. Like, that's not my responsibility. And so if he wants to go eat at White Castle and McDonald's, then that is on him. He's going to reap the consequences. And a couple weeks ago, he reaped the consequences. And he had a huge intestinal issue, and thankfully he finally started listening to me and pulled through with some herbal things. And I said, are you going to start eating right now? You know, like this is on you. And it came down to a point where he said, I can't believe my body's doing this. And I said from the other room, well, when you treat your body like a trash can, it's going to treat you like trash, because that's the way it is. And he got really quiet at that point. It was a long week in our house. Anyway, all of that to say, he's now looking at, okay, how do I not eat gluten? How do I not eat dairy? How do I heal my gut and continue this process? And we don't have an emergency bill. You know, I spent $50 on some teas and some tinctures and some herbs for him, and tons of kombucha and some cayenne pepper and some dandelion root tea. Man, that dandelion root tea, I got a story about that. That stuff's amazing. But so I spent $50 on that. We do not have health insurance. If we'd gone into ER,
still have leftovers of.
we have tons of leftovers. And I told them I want you to drink
Just saying, like it wasn't a one-time deal.
Exactly. And if we'd gone into ER, it would have been $1,000 for them to refer him to another doctor. It would have been $600 for that doctor to refer him to a stomach doctor or
in the meantime, putting him on other medications as preventatives for something they don't even know what they're dealing with.
Absolutely. So, I mean, these are all things. And again, you have to make the decision for you. And this is I want to stress this. This looks different wherever you are in your journey.
Yes, absolutely.
We have gone to 3 years ago, I would have taken him to the emergency room in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have been scared to do what I did.
Well, he had an incident earlier. I hope it's okay. I share. You did go to the ER because it was we don't know.
Yep. 6 months ago, we had another, and actually this 2 weeks ago, I said, all right, this is your wake up call. Like in 6 months, you've had 2 different issues. Yep. Like you got to start changing something. Right. Mm-hmm. And so my point to this is, so the first time, I'll share completely. The first time he was bleeding from his rectum, that scared me. That is something that is not okay. And I have an aunt who actually died of cancer that way. That's how they found out that she had cancer. So of course, like past history trauma for me, I was like, we're going to the ER now. This last time, it was it was more of a stomach pain blockage kind of thing that was going on, but like he wasn't like bleeding or vomiting or anything like that. So you have to take what you know and you have to advocate for you and your loved ones and say, this is something to be scared about and go in, or this is something not to be scared about and to deal with at home. And even if you go in, it's okay to still ask questions. You are not giving over your control just because you went in. Like the first time we went in, they said, we can't find anything wrong. It's probably just an ulcer in his intestine. Take some stool softener. And we went home and he corrected his diet for a while and it got better. And then he went back to what he was doing. And that's when we had this issue. So my point to that is wherever you are in your journey is going to decide where you are on the scrunchy level, right? Like if this is your 5-year-old who is like screaming from pain, you're going to take them to the ER. End of story. Like I would. I don't know what's wrong with you. We're going to the ER, right? If this is your 30-year-old husband who says, man, my stomach really hurts and it's probably because I ate at McDonald's yesterday, we're not going to ER. Like, no, you're going to sit on the toilet for a while. We're going to talk about this, right? So neither of us are telling you that it's bad to go to the ER or that it's bad to get medical intervention or that this one way is the only way to do it. It's up to you to be your body's advocate and your loved one's advocate. And that's what's super important.
Yes. Well, and I'll just share my story on that too. And being on that journey and learning, I had that car accident last summer and ended up with the lacerated spleen. I mean, it was a grade 4 lacerated spleen, and my kids were shuffled into another room. I'm being told I need surgery, without my even knowing it. I was being pumped with 2 bags of blood, prepping for surgery, had an antibiotic in there, all things. And I just let it go because at that point, I'm just like, I have known nothing about what this means, Well, thankfully, God provided a doctor who came in and said, oh no, we're not taking out spleens anymore. Like that, we're going to let you see if you heal. If you end up hemorrhaging or something in the middle of the night, blah, 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 we'll address that and go ahead and have surgery or, and take it out, whatever. But they're like, your body will heal it. And for those of you who don't know, a grade 4 lacerated spleen is, it's a big deal. It literally internal bleeding, like all the things were going on, painful, very painful. And just, like at the time I was giving into adrenaline and all the things. And now I know, again, ask the questions. I preached this and I still gave up, for a lot of multiple reasons, obviously emotional reasons, stress, adrenaline, just been in a car accident, never been in a car accident in my life, all the things. When I relearned the lesson of ask the questions. I should have asked, can this wait? Can my body heal this? What are the XYZ? And granted, I know that's putting a lot on anyone to do that, but I'm prepared now. In the next situation, I will do that. No questions about it. I am confident and vocal enough in myself to know I can. And I've just come that far in that journey to learn something and be able to pick up on it that quickly. So if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, never, that's okay. That's totally fine. But just know that you can get to that point the more and more you stand up for yourself as well. So, and we're all in that journey. And I've now had another antibiotic in my life, and somebody else's blood, all the things. And I'm not going to think about that. I'm just going to continue to heal from it. But yeah, we're all on different journeys. So even, David, who is, been dragging his feet in this, I've been on it for 3 years and advocated for myself and my kids in multiple ways, and still fell into, just, I don't know, just do what you got to do.
Yes.
And it's okay. It really is.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely.
And it would have been okay, even though, just for anyways, you don't want to lose your spleen. It's a very important organ, because you don't want to learn that and then go Google, do I need my spleen? You're like, holy my gosh, thank goodness they didn't take that. So yeah, so ask the questions. Yeah. But if you don't, it's okay. No, there's grace in that, and we're just doing the best we
can. Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing too is I always start my sentences like that, and then it's bigger than the last biggest thing you said. So anyway, another point is listening to your gut. Yep. Listening to is this something that is important, and you will get that intuition and that instinct that says, I need to ask more questions about this acid reflux medication. I need to ask more questions about them taking my spleen out, or should we really take you to the hospital just because your stomach is in pain? What's going on here? And I mean, we're all women. We all have it.
Yep.
It's like a muscle. Our instinct is like a muscle. Our intuition is like a muscle. And the more you use it, the more you will learn how to hear that voice, and the more your body will be able to speak to you. And it gets to the point where you even kind of get a second sense about your loved ones as well, especially your kids,
absolutely. Yeah.
Husbands are a little trickier, sometimes you don't know if they're actually complaining because it's a big deal, or,
Well, and the fear factor is huge. We get told my child had a fever. I took them in, they ended up with cancer.
Right.
I mean, yes, that happens, but it's not common. It's not common at all. And if you're living a healthy lifestyle, it's even less common, right? So we should be downing those numbers. But yeah, and I was going to say too, there are guidelines to follow if you're newer in this journey. A fever is one of the very few things to look for in going into the hospital. I have a love-hate relationship with it being the one thing you look for. There are probably 5 other things that all need to be checked before you can, before it's yes, we need to go to the doctor, So if that's something, there will be a guide for that up in my library as well. It's something I'm working on for just basic flus, and when an antibiotic is okay and when it's not, just a basic guide to help you get started, because it is it's overwhelming.
Even to tack on to all of this, I remember I was a receptionist at a clinic, a walk-in clinic for a year and a half, and how many people we'd have walk in and sit down, and every single one that had a flu would sigh. They'd sit down across from you and oh. And I remember thinking, every time they did that, well, now I have whatever you have, and you don't have, you're here for something other than, you're not here for an appointment, right? You're here because you're sick. And then they would proceed to say, my stomach has been hurting all day and I just threw up and I need to know why. Well, I'm no doctor, but I'm pretty sure you have a stomach bug. I can pretty much tell you. And so all of that to say, as someone who worked at a clinic, it's very frustrating, even on the medical end, to have people just run to the hospital at the drop of a hat. And if you're listening to us, you're probably not one of those people at this point that would do that anyway. But and I obviously am not speaking as a doctor, because my paycheck didn't get paid. If you came to the hospital, my paycheck got paid no matter what. I just like sat there, and if you didn't show up, I still got paid. So like, obviously that didn't affect me personally. Right. And so I'm not saying as a doctor, like, oh, don't go to the ER if you're sick. But as a receptionist, seeing what would happen behind the scenes, like everybody rolled their eyes. Everybody was like, so they have a stomach bug. Like, we're going to take their temperature and send them home and tell them to come back in 3 days. Maybe give them some fluids, but
Antibiotic, because it's protocol.
Yep, that's what they do.
Yep.
So you're like, there's nothing, like, unless there's something actually wrong, don't go into the doctor. Like,
yep. Well, and those are things too. I just recently did a post on this a couple of weeks ago. And it is, you need to have a game plan to go in. So just like I was talking about a guide I'm setting up to have those, you need to have your own. Just like you had a birth plan for your kids, you need to have a plan for when you're sick, because just like you were taught when you were about to give birth, you get that panic mode, you can't think clearly, your emotions are running high because it's your child. And you do have all this pressure and fear of moms don't know anything. And so you do need to have that reminder of, okay, they don't have all of these things. So I know I made this plan in a clear conscience and with all the research and best of my knowledge that it was not time to go in. They're still going to be fine and they're still going to heal themselves.
Yes.
XYZ, whatever it is. And have it and type it up, refer back to it, and then the next thing is to have a support system, because as a mom, everyone will tell you a different story. Again, you're going to have the mom who said, my kid had a low-grade fever for 3 days. We went in, they had cancer. You're going to have the other person who says, my daughter gets 107 fevers regularly and it doesn't bother us. That's just the way they are. And that's fine. And you need to find what's best for you. And you're going to learn and change with that too. Like, you're going to change this plan every time you go into the doctor, because just like that, you're going to have a car accident and then you're going to go, oh, we're actually going to ask about this, like, all the things. And so you need to have that in place, and you need to have that in place, like, so that okay, if I go to the doctor now, what are they going to do? They're going to give me an antibiotic. Where is my guideline for me and my child on when I'm going to take that antibiotic?
Yes.
And once you have that in place, that also gives you the answer of when you're going to go in, because that's all they're going to do for you.
And that is so, like, even as someone that doesn't have a kid, right? Like, if you're listening to this because you have infertility and so you don't have children. When I had influenza B last month, I kept asking over and over again myself, what are they going to do if I go in? Because I had several friends who kept saying, you have 103-degree fever, you need to go into the hospital, which actually, even according to the Mayo Clinic, is not true.
Yep.
But like, for a certain amount of time, right? Like, there's guidelines. But I kept asking them.
There's also, I've learned this, and I keep meaning to tell you this, there's also a difference on the type of thermometer you're using.
Oh.
Meaning to bring that up to you. So another podcast or post, watch my Instagram for that. But FYI on the whole fever scare, because that is a big deal right now, is the fever. And I don't understand why. It is just a symptom of your body. Anyway.
I think it's because it's with influenza B, and so everybody's talking about it because.
Well, and it's what doctors can use as a fear factor. Right. Everybody gets a fever, so let's make it scary.
Right. But I kept asking them, because they kept saying, you need to go in, you need to go in. And I said, what are they going to do? They're going to give me Tylenol. So I'm going to pay them $1,000 for Tylenol when I can take Tylenol here. And we have discussions about whether that worked, like whether we should or not. And I did end up taking Tylenol when I felt, when my body said, I need Tylenol, I took Tylenol. And, okay. My brain just went blank. I took Tylenol. Anyway, what I kept telling them was, like, I'm not going to go in unless I take Tylenol and my fever doesn't go down. Then there's a problem, right? Then that's an emergency. Okay, this is not working. I'm going to continue increasing in temperature and it's going to get really bad. That's an emergency. That's why you would go to the emergency room. Otherwise, I can handle this at home. Why would I spend $1,000 on a Tylenol pill when I can take it here, right? Like, that makes no sense. So,
and do your research on, like, influenza B versus something else. We had influenza B as well. All three of the kids did. I did not get it. But it lasts 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So know that.
Yes.
Be prepared for that.
And that was another reason that I was not concerned, was my symptoms were matching the hundreds of other people who have also had this and not died. So
Exactly.
to me, that says, well, if my symptoms are matching this, then this is just the course. This is just the illness that I have to write out. If it was something totally different, right? Like, let's say influenza B, like, I don't know, you start giggling for 3 weeks and you don't have a fever, but then I have a fever. Now there's something really wrong. Like, okay, I don't know what this is, right? Like, but I mean, when you get the flu season, everybody's talking about all the symptoms, and so it's pretty easy to be like, okay, I've got what everybody else has.
Had that too. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's how we knew. We knew we had influenza B, and I told Nicole, hey, you probably have influenza B.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that happened.
Right.
Because she literally got it like a week or two after we had just had it. And I'm like, girl, telling you. And I told you, I'm like, it's going to last 3 weeks.
Yep.
Right out, flat out.
And somebody else told me the same thing. They said, because I got better. It's this weird one where you get better and then it comes back. And they said, oh yeah, that's going around, and this is the same person that said a week later, you need to go to the emergency room. Okay, wait, you just said this was going around. Why do I need to go to the emergency room? Because I'm not feeling well? Oh, what are they going to do? Put me in a medically induced coma? Like, that's the only way to not experience what I'm experiencing, unfortunately. And who knows? You might experience that while you're in the coma. Who knows? So wouldn't that be horrible? Anyway, we exhausted this topic, I think.
Yes. Yeah. So I think the main point we really wanted to make, especially with me going into medications, because if you didn't hear our last podcast, I will be delving into medications we should not be taking under any circumstances, what ones are okay, and etc. And Nicole is going to be doing the same. She's delving into IVF, and she's going to be the drug. She already has. If you are struggling with infertility and haven't taken Nicole's Clomid to IVF course, oh my gosh. So I admittedly, as her best friend, just finally listened to it a couple weeks ago, and I have never personally dealt with that. I have dealt with a miscarriage, but I've never dealt with infertility, but it was eye-opening. It was amazing to listen to and to just solidify, even in my daily life, these things about our Western medicine and what we should be doing, and what is God glorifying, what is not, and that there are answers to this. It is not a mystery. It is, I would almost say, one can tell me otherwise, but it gets fairly black and white when you actually do your research.
Yes, it does.
Like, we have moral grounds to stand on.
It does.
And so I think that's why we just really wanted to go over that we are Scrunchy. We do believe in Western medicine. I thank doctors up and down. You'll see it in my posts. I praise my doctors. I have several I love. And it's a great thing, but we have to utilize herbs and spices and earthing and fresh air and mental space and all these other things that even doctors, if we would just stop and listen to our doctors in these certain ways, do support as well.
Yes.
Like, it's always very interesting to me. I walk into a doctor's office when I'm delivering a package or whatever, and they have a TV screen up and they're saying, eat this, do this for whatever, and I'm like, I say the same thing, but yet you go back in that office and they prescribe a medication. And it's just, It's just very interesting to me. They do agree with us. We're all on the same page as far as that goes. It's just the follow through.
I think
and
that's the struggle. There's a lot of hand tying and red tape that they're strapped behind.
Well, and it's what they've trained us to want. We know there's a medication for an answer. They have trained us that way. Mm-hmm. And especially the baby boomer generation has been trained in that way, in that aspect. And so that's what they have to give, because it's what we want. We want to. We don't want to
lecture about whatever.
Yeah. ...
So
yeah. Anyway, just all of that to say, we are Scrunchy. We really are, but we really have to make these changes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. So thank you for listening. We'll see you back in a couple of weeks, and we'll see you back in a couple of weeks.
All right. Bye.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you want to hear more, hit that subscribe button.
And a special thank you to those who make this financially possible. To support this podcast, please follow the link in our description.
To learn more about one-on-one coaching, books, and other resources, check me out at www.nicolehagstead.com.
And check me out at thebewildlife.com.
Our intro and exit music is titled Happy Song by Pachyderm. The song is licensed under an Attribution Share Alike license.